What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video, and we're going to be looking at a channel favorite in Mono Green Tron this week, as of course we have had a little over a week now since the banning of Fury and Up the Beanstalk to kind of see how the format shakes out. And the first deck we're going to look at in this new format is going to be Mono Green Tron for a few reasons. There's a few things I like about it super early in like the meta while we're trying to figure out like what decks are still good and what decks are, potential new players in the format now with Fury and Up the Beanstalk being banned. Of course, before we get too deep into that, if you are not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so and ringing the notification bell. Doing that lets you know when my videos get posted as soon as they get posted. And if you go to the links down below, I will have a link to this deck list specifically, along with a link to the Discord server as well. If you want to go over there and join, follow that link. So, Mono Green Tron is something that seasoned and even some like newer modern players are familiar with, just because I think this is one of the easier decks to play in terms of how many games you end up actually winning just by playing things. There is some like complicated things about the deck. There are some things that you have to think about when playing this deck, but by and large, just going knowing the basics of just getting one of each of your Tron lands in Urza's Mine, Power Plant, and Tower. Not Saga. Saga does not affect this in any way. But if you get an Urza's Tower, an Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Mine on the battlefield, your Mine and Power Plant will tap for 2 colorless mana instead of 1, and your Tower will tap for 3 instead of 1. Meaning that when you play your third Tron land of a different name, you are going to have 7 mana, which means that it will open up plays like, casting Allah's Dust to clear away your opponent's board. If they, build up a little bit too much, this is kind of an answer to like Yawgmoth and just getting to get them to sacrifice all their colored permanents. You have Karn the Great Creator, which can go get a plethora of things in the sideboard. You have eventually getting up to like Cityscape Leveler and Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, on like the 4th turn of the game, which are just game enders on their own, considering that Ulamog's going to get rid of your opponent's 2 best permanents, a 10/10 indestructible, so like their best creature, or, after you kind of like get rid of their things, is not going to be able to get through, and you're going to be able to just easily take it out. And then, of course, attacking with it is going to not only put them on a clock, if they're able to chump block it, they are going to have to exile 20 cards from the top of their library. Eventually, they're going to run out, and you're going to win the game. So, looking at all this stuff, I mean, obviously the deck is centered around getting Mine, Power Plant, Tower on the battlefield, and then slamming a payoff in Karn the Great Creator, Ulamog, Cityscape Leveler, even like Wormcoil Engine counts, and all, even getting like the One Ring, so you can go and get a lot of these things. So, how is the deck doing this in a way that is consistent, that is also not like disrupting the game plan as well? And we have cards like Expedition Map, which you can pay 1 mana and then pay 2 and sacrifice it to search your library for a land card and put it to your hand. This is fetchable with a card like Urza's Saga, which is going to be not necessarily integral to the game plan, but like this is a way that you can make some pretty big tokens. You're able to kind of survive at least like a few more turns, which will give you plenty of time to find one of your big haymakers to go and get one of your big haymakers. So, Saga can go get Sphere, Star, Map, Relic, so on. But like Expedition Map in particular being a very good one, because you can play it on turn 1 off of a Tron land, play a second named Tron land, and then the Expedition Map can go get the last piece that you are missing. Is an easy way essentially to go and get Tron on turn 3. You have cards like Sylvan Scrying. You're playing 4 copies of it, search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it to your hand. While it seems counterintuitive, they had to pay like colored mana to play a Sylvan Scrying. You do have cards like Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star, which you can play on turn 1 off of a Tron land, play a second named Tron land, and then play, crack the Sphere Star for green mana, cast the Sylvan Scrying. You could even potentially draw the land that you need off of a Sphere or Star. You also have a card like Ancient Stirrings, which again is like another card where before you even play your second land, you can play a Sphere or Star and then crack it for green mana, draw a card, and then Ancient Stirrings. Look at your top 6 cards, essentially draw a card and then look at 5 with the Ancient Stirrings, and then get to put a land or just a colorless card in your hand. So this gets to pull double duty by also looking for any of your haymakers in, Wormcoil Engine, Cityscape Leveler, Ulamog, Karn the Great Creator. Even can find your one of board wipe in the deck in all those dust, and then even your Oblivion Stones as well, which is a little bit fancier of a removal option for the fact that it'll destroy each non-land permanent, but you're able to put fate counters on your things to make sure that they do not get blown up by the Oblivion Stone, which is really neat. There is some synergy in the deck as well. Haywire Might dies, gains 2 life, but you can pay a green, sacrifice it to exile a non-creature artifact or a non-creature enchantment. Obviously, this is pretty good in some of the mirror matches where people are playing the One Ring, but it's also very good for your own One Ring because you can activate it, draw 3, 4, 5 cards, activate the Haywire Might, exile your One Ring, and then future Karn the Great creators will be able to go and get the One Ring, and I believe Haywire might just sacrifice itself. But either way, you'll be able to get like One Rings in the future, which means that you could loop the protection clause like when you cast the One Ring, which is pretty powerful, in games where you just need like that extra turn or two before you just kind of get to, control the game, essentially. We talked a little bit about the mana base, the important cards. You have Mine, Power Plant, Tower. That's how you end up making 7 mana on turn 3. You have Urza Saga to go and get some of your neat, like, 1 mana artifacts. You can go get Haywire Might as well. You have 3 forests, just because sometimes you're going to need basic lands to, cast some of these green spells. Blood Moon is kind of a killer for this deck, so just having access to green mana, so you're able to actually Haywire Might, get rid of something like a Blood Moon effect of sorts, is going to help out a lot. Beseiju, same thing. You want to be able to channel this to get rid of other problematic permanents. You can mess with your opponent's Tron lands with a Beseiju, which can go a long way into making sure that you set up Tron before they set up Tron and try to take over the game. Blast Zone for those pesky small creature decks. This is like a removal spell on a land that you can tutor for thanks to like your Sylvan Scryings and your extra copies of Expedition Map. The sideboard is strictly made up of a ton of silver bullets for the matchup. We've seen this in like Mono Green, Devotion, and Pioneer, and it is no way different in the modern version of Karn the Great Creator decks. Just that your lands will then generate tons and tons of mana over the course of however many turns. You have Chalice of the Void for the Cascade decks. You have Engineered Explosives as like another answer to like Rhinos. And of course, you can make different colors of mana with Chromatic Sphere and Star. Of course, you just have access to green anyway, so being able to potentially get 2 and maybe even 3 drops as well. Pretty nice utility. You have Tormod's Crypt is like a free way to mess with the graveyard. You have Walking Ballista, something that you can just dump your mana into, get super big, and you're not even necessarily forced to shoot all the counters off of it. You can just kind of leave it on the battlefield, get bigger and bigger, and then eventually it hits your opponent once, you remove all the counters, and they end up losing the game. 2 Haywire Might, we've seen it over here as well. It's kind of like a way that you can gain a little bit of life and deal with some problematic non-creature artifacts or enchantments. You have a Pithing Needle, Yogg matchup, Cursed Totem, Yawgmoth matchup. Of course, Pithing Needle has a little bit more utility in what it can do, because you can just name anything that has an activated ability that's not a mana ability. They can't activate it. So it gets a spot here just sheerly for versatility, and of course, like shutting down activated abilities is pretty important. Cursed Totem specifically, I think, is in response to like Yawgmoth. If you look like on the Goldfish page, we're just over a week after the bannings, and Yawgmoth's number 1, which is kind of where we thought the format would be after something like Fury went away. You have Liquid Metal Coating in combination with Karn. You can just shut down any permanent that your opponent has. They can't activate any abilities of it, even if it is a mana ability. And then you have the added bonus of getting to go after your opponent's lands by turning it into an artifact and then plussing it with Karn and absolutely just destroying their day. The Stone Brain, the different combo decks, like this is just something that you can go and grab, exile it, and of course, in a roundabout way, if games go long, you can just keep getting back the Stone Brain with Karn the Great creators, and then eventually just exile your entire opponent's deck, or just enough cards to where they're going to draw out, or they have like no win conditions, like no absolutely way to win the game, and you'll eventually just find a way to win from all of these other big things on the sideboard plus what you have in your deck. And Snaring Bridge is like a way to kind of blunt a lot of offense from the super aggressive decks. Uh, Players are still going pretty big. Like Yawgmoth and Snaring Bridge probably isn't going to be the absolute greatest. Not like you have a hard time really getting rid of all the cards that are in your hand. But for purposes of like getting this on like turn 3, you're going to end up having enough cards in hand to where against most decks you're going to be able to stop a lot of what they're doing, and they're not really going to be able to attack you, and the next turn you're going to be able to dump your hand. Most of them aren't going to get a lot of use out of like that turn where you have cards in hand for Ensnaring Bridge. Phyrexian Metamorph just becomes a copy of an artifact or a creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So you could use this, and you can copy like Arcana Cruelty. If you have players that are still playing like the Creativity deck, this can just hit, copy other permanents, like obviously like Cityscape Level, like Wormcoil Engine, maybe one of these other creatures that are in here, and like Haywire Mites. This is essentially like a versatile card that you can use to just copy your other things. Like technically this could be a copy of the ring, so you reset like the burden counters essentially on it. And I believe when it enters the battlefield, if you cast the Phyrexian Metamorph and it enters as a copy of the One Ring, you'll end up getting the protection effect as well. So you get like the full benefit of like the ring, except you have like a 3-mana ring later, which is really neat. Another copy of Cityscape Leveler, a Sundering Titan. Now you would see decks like this playing Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, and they would you just essentially gave your opponent a forest, and you could potentially blow up 2, 3, 4 different colored lands, or basic land type lands. Also, when this leaves the battlefield, it gets to do the same exact thing. And of course, you're really only playing forests, so in the worst case, you blow up like 1, maybe 2 of your lands for your like 4 to 6 of your opponent's lands, which is really good. So overall, that is the Mono Green Tron deck. Really not much has changed from the deck that we've seen at the Pro Tour versus the deck that we are seeing now as the bannings that had happened over a week ago. So kind of my thoughts, usually early in formats, you see like control decks and Tron decks are usually pretty good and safe choices. I think a lot of the time, like you can default to decks that were playable in the meta, like even when like the broken stuff or like the bad stuff was happening, and you can see them as like, how does the deck look? Does it need to change? Was it making choices based on, other things that are happening? And I think Fury getting banned really just made it so that the creature decks like Yawgmoth end up having an easier time in those matchups, even against like Red and 6s and Orcish Bowmasters and whatnot, because they were already wanting to play some of these good, 2 toughness creatures anyway that help forward their game plan. And on top of that too, like their 1 toughness things are either like irrelevant, like they're playing their own Bowmasters, which like fine, if you want to like Ren 6 ping a Bowmaster, they absolutely love it. Or they come back in the case of like Young Wolf and Stringergeist. So I think for the time being, for at least the first like few weeks while we try to like kind of shake out and figure out everything that's going on, see if any new archetypes develop thanks to Furying Up the Beanstalk being gone, and kind of like what improvements and changes that some of the other established meta decks take. That said, Mono Green Tron really doesn't have a lot to change. It just wants to consistently find its Tron pieces and cast its big threats and close out the game as quickly as possible, and has the ability to kind of shut the door very quickly. Of course, we know playing like a Wormcoil Engine on like turn 3 and then Ulamog on turn 4 is usually going to be enough for one that is lethal on board by the next turn. Also, to like having to deal with a 10/10 indestructible, and you can't even technically destroy Wormcoil Engine because then you'll leave 2 3/3s behind, makes life and decisions really interesting. And a lot of times, if you stumble against Tron, you are going to lose the game because the deck is just so consistent. I referenced it in one of some of the easier decks to play in Modern, and I alluded to it in the beginning. I outright said it in the beginning of the video that this deck is easy in terms of how many games that you play where you just go Tron land, Tron land, Tron land, threat, and then you just keep slamming threats. You keep playing Tron lands and you keep slamming threats. And while you think that like that's the magical Christmas Land, like the deck, I mean, with the amount of consistency in Ancient Stirring, Sylvan Scrying, Expedition Map to find those lands, and then, Ancient Stirrings on the other half of it, and like these spheres, stars, relics, and so on. Even like the One Ring is like considered a haymaker because you're just going to end up eventually drawing, when you draw 3, 6 extra cards, you're going to find at least one payoff and all of it. Not including the draw subs as well, you're looking at almost a sixth of your deck after so many activations of the One Ring that you're going to be able to kind of stall out the game. You have a little bit of like a way to offset some of the damage from the ring because of Wormcoil Engine just being such a big lifelinking attacker, as well, put pressure on your opponent, so on. All in all, this deck is set up pretty well in the early terms of the meta to have some success and potentially find a foothold again in the meta, where we saw it kind of up there with like Rakdos and Rhinos and stuff like that, and then slowly falling off. That's kind of like the trend of Tron, and just speaks to how much time and effort you have to put in with the deck to kind of get to the point where even when it starts to take a downturn in the meta, you're still able to put up, fantastic results, make top 8s at tournaments, and make deep runs as well. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel, of course, if you have not already. Ring the notification bell so you know when videos get posted. If you are interested in playing this deck list in particular, I will have a link in the description down below for this deck. And, of course, join the Discord server as well. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.